Good afternoon and happy Friday, everyone. It's Alyssa Corum, and I'm joined by Ed Carson for a look at the stock market today. And since it is Friday, we are going to take a step back, look at a little bit more technical action throughout the week, and give you a plan for the week ahead. So before we kick off with a look at the NASDAQ, Ed, just want to let everyone know, give them a heads up on the three stocks that we're also going to be taking a look at. And those are Palantir, a lot of interesting moves for IPO stocks this weekend. Also, Apple, it seems like the mega cap tech stocks are waking up a bit, and Caterpillar, which we looked at on IBD Live this morning. So we'll take a look at the setup there. But Ed, kick us off here. Let's look at the NASDAQ. Ended positive today, up about 0.1%. We had the S&P 500 down about 0.3%. The Dow down 0.6%. The Russell outperforming today, up 0.9%. But a pretty impressive close, I'd say, for the NASDAQ.
Yeah, it was a nice action. We were selling off, not huge, but it wasn't. We were down significantly for the day, and rallied back and to end in positive territory. It was a really, really strong week for the NASDAQ, especially big cap techs. You can see how, the regression line, we've moved considerably above that, and we're now getting sort of close to the standard, half standard deviation. Haven't done that since back here. Things are looking strong. The only question is it too strong?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because we know in the past, when we've gotten up to that level, that half standard deviation, or even exceeded it, what follows is a pullback. We're not predicting a certain timeline of when things are going to happen, but it's definitely a scenario to be aware of.
Yeah, and the 50-day line is another way to measure it, because yesterday we got to 8.1% above the 10-week line, 50-day line. Usually when we get to about 6% or so, that's, the rule of thumb is you start looking for maybe a pullback, or at least sideways action to cool off. We can go higher. We did back here, but you can see what happened when we went higher. We kept pushing through in these last few days, and then really came down hard. So there's, the higher we go, the more the risk that there'll be a pullback, and there's the more the risk that'll be sharp. But hasn't happened yet. We kept on marching higher today.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty lucrative market over the last couple of months, especially I think for our style of trading. So you want to be thinking about protecting those profits if and when those sell signals arise. And just really quickly, Ed, before we move on, you talked about where we are compared to the 50-day. What about where we are compared to that 21-day?
Yeah, we're still, I think we're about 4% above the 21-day line. There's the Webby's RSI, which actually measures the low of the day versus the 21-day. So when you get to 4% or more on that, that's usually a signal. For at least further on, you can do it early on in a rally, like when we first followed through here. You expect to get above 4% or so, But if we get it here, then it's sort of like, wait a second, that's just another signal of being a little extended. Now, again, because it's the low of the day, where it would actually came down somewhat. So, but that's just another measure to say, well, we're getting a little bit up there. You can just sort of tell, there was less of a gap here with the 21-day, and there's just a bit more.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's good to know where we are in the overall market, I think. Let's also provide our audience a little bit of perspective from the weekly chart. The NASDAQ up some 4.3% or so for the week. Yet another strong week, and there's a lot more big blue bars on the chart in the last 6, 8, however many weeks or plus, and only some very small red bars. So I think that definitely signals that we're in a pretty strong bull market.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Just these tiny moves ever since we've had that October retreat here in that election follow through area, that rally around there. Yeah, there's these little moves, and even they're just not much of a declines, and just followed up immediately with strong gains. So, this is, while you should be on the watch for some concerns, you definitely want to take advantage of this, because this is a really strong market. Yes, it may end someday. You want to be careful, but you do want to be, at the same, while you want to be cautious and protect your gains, you still want to, while the market's moving like this, you want to take advantage of that.
That's exactly right. And now let's take a look at the S&P 500 and see how that fared for the week. Finishing down, like I said, slightly on Friday, but still also had a pretty strong week, up over 2%.
Yeah, a strong week. I mean, obviously a lot of big techs plus Tesla are in the S&P 500, and we'll get to some of the big techs. But yeah, big techs are really moving, and there's a lot of strong action. So, this isn't looking as extended, but it's just really, this is really strong action. Still, big blue bars. The red bars are not that, not much of a issue. So really a strong market overall.
Yeah, a really nice trending market, which has been very helpful for buying stocks, taking advantage of some of those early entries, adding even more on those traditional breakouts perhaps, or initiating positions there and seeing gains. So let's take a look at a couple of individual stocks, starting off with PLTR, a relatively recent IPO from last fall, a huge day today, Ed, up 25%. It definitely wasn't up that much, I don't think, this morning on IBD Live, but really did it start roaring higher throughout the session, really just kept picking up steam throughout the day. But we presented this one as an actionable name early on in the day.
Yeah, and I'll show the weekly in a moment, but it rebounded from the 10-week line. Okay, you could have bought off of that, but you could also wait I think this was really the area, in this area where it broke a trend line and maybe got over this short resistance anywhere in this area. Really great. I mean, I don't think anybody expected this kind of move, but wow, that is quite a move. First, I'm just going to show the 5-minute bar because it was just
Yes.
so incredible.
Yeah. But it's important to buy it right. I mean, this isn't one where you check in on it in the last hour of trade and want to catch the train there.
No, because obviously we've seen with a lot of IPOs, there'll be a lot, and this one's had a little bit of seasoning. It's like 4 months old. Wow, but it's I mean, you still see these massive moves. So you could easily see a day like this and followed by days like this. I mean, not predicting anything, but I mean, that would not be out of character for this stock or for IPOs, especially in this market. So, I mean, it'd be great if it could form a handle here. And then if you didn't buy it, you could set it up again and buy it then in that situation if it breaks out from there. But, if you didn't buy it, when it was really clearing out, it's clearly extended, but it also shows you the power of this. But yeah, you really don't want to be chasing a stock like this. You can just look at the chart and see all the negative days that are out there. You don't want to be caught out with that.
That's exactly right. And just a reminder, Palantir is on leaderboard. So we're definitely keeping tabs on a lot of these hot IPO stocks. And it's one area of the market that's proving to be very fruitful. But you got to buy them right. And now let's take a look at Apple, a little bit of a different flavor than Palantir, but it's also had a pretty big week for Apple, reversing higher today, up about 1.6% for the session, and for the week, gaining over 9%. So, Ed, it seems like big cap tech is starting to finally wake up here a little bit after a number of months of just kind of keeping pace with the market.
Yeah, there's a lot of good action in big techs. I mean, Apple, there's Microsoft was hitting some early entries. Netflix surged on its earnings reports. Google broke out. They're all sort of moving up again. That's one reason why the NASDAQ's getting extended. They're just these massive stocks are finally moving after taking all this time off. You could have gotten into this stock when it rebounded from the 21-day line or the 10-week line on a weekly chart, and it broke this trend line. It's in a buy zone now after clearing this 138.89. But we have earnings next week. And I think that, I mean, maybe if you bought it here, you have a cushion of some sort, maybe not enough, but you have some cushion, but that's just tricky. You just don't know when you combine, earnings season overall and with the market being somewhat extended, maybe Apple will do great, but you could also have a real negative reaction too. So investors just have to be aware of that is really looming large.
Yeah, always smart to have a profit cushion heading into those earnings reports. And just because something is in that blue buy zone doesn't mean it's a good buy. You have to keep that in mind. Look at all of those other factors, as Ed is mentioning. And last but not least, let's take a look at Caterpillar, ticker CAT. We've been focusing more and more, Ed, on it's these industrial names as of late, as we're seeing some rotation. Caterpillar having a pretty nice move over the last couple of months. Walk us through this setup.
Yeah, I mean, this stock has actually rebounded quite nicely. You look at the fundamentals, yeah, they're terrible, and the economy almost came to a halt in the middle of the year, and it's still rebounding, but every bit there's an expectation for growth. But it had a nice run, and there's been some breakouts here. It cleared a 4 weeks tight area in here, and now it's set up again. This is a 3 weeks tight. The little blue, light blue glowing area will show up in a few hours. It takes a few hours for it to digest, but so it's setting up here. The official buy point would be 227, but if you look on a daily chart, it's rebounding from the 21-day line. You could probably buy it early, if it went through here, but once again, there is earnings coming up. So
exactly.
There's a reason to diversify, because if you have all big techs or all IPOs or all software, I mean, if there's a pullback, some of these sectors could have really big moves. Caterpillar is a leader now. There's certainly an argument to be made to keep some of these cyclicals on your radar, maybe in your portfolio, because they've actually had pretty good moves over the last several months. They're not necessarily slow and pokey right now. They have their moves, and the economy coming out of a deep recession into growth with tons of money of stimulus coming in is probably a decent environment for cyclicals like that.
Yeah, and speaking of groups moving together, you often do see that with earnings season. A lot of times there are companies that will move in sympathy, not always, but there are times that you will see those moves in sympathy on some of those quarterly reports, or maybe a company is giving their industry outlook for the year, and we see investors reacting to that.
And it seems like big techs in general seem to move, like Netflix moves seem to inspire Apple, even though they really, I mean, they have, okay, there's Apple TV, but nobody thinks that.
Different businesses,
a little bit different business, but nonetheless, it's still inspired. So there can be that kind of moves, even if you don't think there's a related, but definitely like when Apple reports, there's going to be a lot of, a lot of chip makers, and Tesla, when it comes out on next Wednesday, the same day as Apple, a lot of EV stocks might move on that. So yeah, you'd want to keep that in mind with earnings season, not just about your own stocks, but about those related things. That definitely keeping in mind when you're looking this weekend and what comes in the week ahead.
Yeah, don't want to be caught off guard with that. And speaking of the week ahead, Ed, let's put it all together, because it overall seemed like a really positive week for a lot of Can Slim investors out there. So what should they be thinking now as they prepare for the week ahead? We talked about earnings season, of course, being a big factor to keep in mind, but what are some portfolio management strategies that investors should also be considering?
I mean, just look to see if your stocks are extended. I mean, especially, in a scenario, especially with the market being a little extended, extended stocks like that, high flyers, they might be at more risk of a bigger drop. So you just want to think about it. You consider selling into strength, or just having a game plan in that regard. Definitely, if you have earnings coming up, do you have a cushion? Do you have a cushion in that? I mean, are you really ready for a move? Like if some of these stocks fall 5, 10, some of them could fall 15, 20%. And it's not unreasonable. Some of the, depending on the stock's history, do you have a cushion for that kind of scenario? Because all of a sudden you have had these great gains over the past year. You don't want to see them lost with, maybe temporary, but maybe, maybe something else going on with your individual stocks or your portfolio.
Right. And the flip side to earnings season is, if this market can continue to hold up and trend higher, what are those stocks that you have on your watch list? Maybe it's too close to the earnings report now to buy, like we were talking about with Apple, but are you prepared to act on a gap up, like with what we saw with Netflix? We also talked about Microsoft. I mean, there's a number of stocks that you want to be at least looking at if they're not in your portfolio. Of course, you got to look at overall market conditions as well, and the actual reaction. But stocks that are, they meet our fundamental criteria, they're setting up in bases, they have potential for those breakaway earnings gaps. It's important to not be caught flat-footed.
Oh yeah, this is a great time to do it, because you don't want to be just trying like, oh, I didn't realize this had earnings. Wow, I'm just going to go, what? What are you going to do there? Because the stocks can move quite a bit. Yeah, setting up, checking out with the stocks that that might be for earnings that on the watch list. That is a great possibility on to things like that. And just just in general, what's your line in the sand with the stocks that you own and how you go? And, while we talk about being defensive a little bit, just a little bit more cautious, you don't need to be defensive yet. Just be a little more prudent in your, bullishness, but this is still a really strong market. So far, there's nothing out there that's really negative, just these little warning signs that maybe something might happen, but it may be minor and may not happen for a while anyway. So it's going to be a fascinating week ahead.
Yeah. But if that pullback does happen, I think another thing to do, like you said, look at your line in the sand, but look at those weekly charts. You don't want to be panic selling at the first sign of negativity in the market.
I definitely need to do that. I see some of these stocks, like, oh my goodness, and then, wait a second, doesn't look so bad. Doesn't look so bad. So yes, that is a great way. Definitely look at daily and weekly charts before making those decisions.
All right, everyone. And guess where else we look at daily and weekly charts all the time? IBD Live. It's our daily morning live stream. We're sharing our screens, talking about stocks to watch, stocks that are actionable early on in the day, like Palantir. Jumia was another one, and more. But those are just a couple of highlights that flew really high today, Ed. But there's a little bit of everything on the show.
Yeah, we're talking about breakouts, we're talking about setups. We have little arguments about things. We're doing educational. You have great poll questions that a lot of it's crowdsourced for the audience.
Yeah.
And just a great mix of stuff. I think it's a great hour and a half plus now for everyone involved.
Exactly. Come join us for music, education, stock ideas, banter back and forth. It's a lot of fun. Investors.com/IBD Live. All right, everyone, have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.